Lena Ward knew the desert like it was stitched into her bones. Every ridge, every shadow, every place a man might vanish. She'd grown beneath the brutal. New Mexico sun had breathed its dust since the first time she saddled up. Now that same dust clung to her throat as she pushed Sundrop forward through the tight canyon, pass rifle balanced across the saddle. "Easy, girl," she murmured, patting the mare's neck as the animal's ears twitched forward alert. Something was off. The air had gone too quiet, unnaturally still. Even the cicadas had gone silent. Lena gripped the rifle tighter, her blue eyes squinting beneath the harsh glare. She shouldn't have ridden this far from Cimarron alone. Her father, Marshal Ward, would blow a fuse if he knew. But at 22, she was tired of being the sheriff's daughter, always watched, always protected, always expected to stay inside the fence. The faint trail she'd been tracking vanished into a mess of scattered rocks, forcing her to dismount and guide Sundrop by the reins. After 10 steps, she stopped dead. Blood stained the sand. Dark, wet patches still glistened in the sunlight. Her pulse quickened. The trail led behind a clump of scrub. Instinct screamed at her to turn around to fetch her father and his men. She'd been raised on stories of Apache ambushes of bodies, found butchered under a sky that didn't care, especially now with that savage Kiro said to be leading raids across the territory. Her father's warnings rang in her ears. But something else, something deeper, nameless, pulled her forward. The blood said someone was hurt, wounded. Lena tied Sundrop to a bent juniper and crept ahead, her boots sat in the dust. The rifle's weight grounded her as she rounded the brush and stopped cold. A man lay against the rock wall, one leg outstretched, wrong, the other bent under him. His breathing was shallow, ragged. Blood soaked a rough bandage on his thigh and trickled from a split above his temple. But it wasn't the wounds that made Lena's finger tighten on the trigger. It was his face. High cheekbones, sun-dark copper skin, jet-black hair falling past his shoulders. Apache. His eyes snapped open, sharp black, unflinching like a hawk's. They locked on hers, and even in the heat, a chill ran through her. Neither moved, neither breathed. Then his gaze dropped to her rifle and something shifted in his expression. Not fear. Resignation. "You're Grant Ward's daughter," he said, voice low and rough with a faint accent. His English was precise, each word placed like a stone. It wasn't a question. Lena blinked. "How do you know that?" A flicker of a smile tugged his lips. "Everyone knows the blue-eyed girl who rides like she was born in the saddle." He shifted with a wince. "I've seen you at Breck's trading post, from a distance." She should have been alarmed. But instead, curiosity outpaced caution. "You're bleeding bad." "Yes." Calm. Plain. The bullet went through, but the wound opened again. "I can't go farther today." Lena scanned him closer. His clothes were a patchwork buckskin leggings, a faded cotton shirt torn at the shoulder. A knife sheath hung empty at his belt. Around his neck, partly tucked into the shirt, she caught sight of a silver medallion, and the realization hit her like a kick to the chest. Every town from Santa Fe to El Paso had plastered his likeness sketches that didn't quite get the face right, but always mentioned the medallion. A tall Apache with stolen silver. The man her father had hunted for months. "You're Kiro," she whispered, lifting the rifle again. "The one they say led the rout and raid." 15 dead, she added. A shadow passed through his eyes. Pain, fury, maybe both. "I am Kiro," he said, "but I didn't lead that raid. That blood isn't mine." Lena let out a hard laugh. "They all say that." "Yet you haven't shot me," he said evenly, "or gone running to your father." The truth of it stopped her cold. Why hadn't she? Everything she'd been taught told her he was dangerous, a killer. There was a price on his head that could build the town a new school. But another part of her, a quieter, older part, saw something different. This man wasn't cold, wasn't cruel. There was pain in his eyes, exhaustion, but not the dead, glassy emptiness she'd seen in true murderers. The way he said her name sent a strange shiver down her spine. The smart choice was clear. Ride back, call her father, let the law decide. But another thought gnawed at her. What if he's telling the truth? Her father's justice was swift and final, especially for Apache men. You'll die if that wound isn't treated right, she said at last, lowering the rifle just an inch. Yes, that quiet readiness to meet death, it rattled her more than any threat. But not the hollow, lifeless stare she had seen in men who truly delighted in violence. You should, he went on when she didn't answer. Your father would be proud. The great Kiro brought down by the Marshal's daughter. The edge of bitterness in his voice stirred something sharp inside her. I don't need my father's approval to decide who I am. Even as the words left her mouth, Lena knew they weren't entirely true. Her whole life had been shaped by Grant Ward's expectations, where she rode, who she spoke to, what future awaited her. Kiro watched her, closely reading her face. Then what will you choose, Lena Ward? The sound of her name, spoken so steadily, sent an unexpected chill through her. The sensible path was obvious. Ride back to town. Bring her father and his men. This man stood accused of unspeakable crimes. And yet, doubt gnawed at her. What if he's telling the truth? Her father's justice was quick and unforgiving, especially when it came to an Apache. Lena decided in a single heartbeat, knowing it might be the most reckless choice of her life. There's an old line shack about half a mile east, she said. Used to belong to the Wilson spread before they sold out. No one goes there anymore. Her voice stayed calm, practical. If a man hid there, no one would think to look. Surprise flickered across his face. Why tell me this? I don't know, she admitted. Maybe because I think everyone deserves to be heard before they're judged. Or maybe because I'm a fool. She stepped back, the rifle still ready, but no longer aimed at his chest. Kiro nodded once. With careful effort, he braced himself against the rock and forced himself upright. Pain flashed across his face before he mastered it, but Lena saw how heavily he leaned on his good leg. I need to get back before I'm missed, she said. My father has men watching for you all over the territory. They won't give me a second look, but they'd shoot you without asking. Something unreadable crossed his eyes. Why risk yourself for a stranger? He asked quietly. For an enemy. Lena didn't have an answer ready. I don't know that you are, she said. Then after a pause, not yet, she hesitated. I'll come back tomorrow, with supplies. If you're gone, then you're gone, she added softly. If not, she left the thought hanging. For a long moment, he said nothing. He simply held her gaze with an intensity that made her feel as if he could see straight through her careful mask, down to every doubt and fear she kept buried. Until tomorrow, then, Lena Ward, he said at last. There was something formal in his tone, like a promise or a warning. As she rode back toward town, the lowering sun stretching long shadows across the land, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that she had just shifted the course of her life forever. Whether it would save her or ruin her, she couldn't yet tell. The old line shack stood alone against the endless New Mexico sky, like a forgotten grave marker. The boards had weathered to a dull silver, and the roof sagged where one beam had begun to rot. Lena approached with care. Her saddlebags were heavy with supplies she'd quietly taken from town. There was no sign of movement, no proof the wounded Apache had made it here at all. Maybe he'd slipped away in the night, trusting the wild more than a white woman's word. Or maybe his injuries had been too much and he lay dead somewhere among the rocks and scrub. The thought unsettled her more than she expected. She dismounted, tying Sundrop to a stunted pine near a thin patch of grass. The mare gave a soft nicker, sensing her unease. Easy girl, Lena murmured, stroking her neck before turning toward the shack. Her hand drifted instinctively to the revolver at her hip, her father's old Colt given to her on her 16th birthday. She'd never fired it at a man, but she'd spent enough hours at practice to know she could if she had to. The door hung slightly open. The rusted hinges groaned as she pushed inside. After the glare outside, the dimness made her blink. Dust motes floated in a single beam of light spilling through a small window. The room was bare. A rough table, a broken chair, a narrow cot against the wall, empty. Disappointment washed over her, followed by a sharp stab of shame. What had she expected? That a hunted man would simply wait, trusting the goodwill of the marshal's daughter? You came. Lena spun, drawing the Colt in one smooth motion. Kiro stood in the doorway of what looked like a storage room, his tall frame filling the narrow space. He'd fashioned a crude crutch from a broken fence post to keep weight off his wounded leg. In the low light, his face looked sharper cheekbones and jaw carved by shadow. I said I would, she replied, lowering the gun but not holstering it. His eyes flicked to the weapon, then back to her face. Trust grows slowly between our peoples. The words slipped from her before she could stop them. Can you blame us? He shook his head once. No. He moved with care toward the table, leaning hard on the makeshift crutch. Just as you cannot fault my people for defending what was always ours. His voice carried no anger, only a quiet certainty that hollowed out any argument she might have made. Lena set her saddlebags down on the table, aware of his steady, assessing gaze. I brought bandages, she said. Whiskey for the wound, some jerky, hardtack. She paused. And these. From the bottom of the bag she drew out a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Willow bark. For the pain. She hesitated. The old medicine woman in town showed me how to prepare it. Surprise crossed his face. You know our medicines? Some. Lena shrugged. Delaquin, the medicine woman, is half Mexican, half Pueblo. She's been here longer than anyone. She unwrapped the packet, revealing thin strips of dried bark. She treats folks the town doctor won't touch. Kiro's expression softened, just a little. Your father allows this. My father doesn't know everything I do. Lena met his eyes without flinching. Now let me see the wound. He hesitated, and she understood why. Letting her close, letting her see his injury, meant placing himself entirely at her mercy. For a man hunted like an animal, that kind of vulnerability must have felt impossible. I could have brought my father yesterday, she said quietly. I didn't. Something shifted in his gaze, not trust, but acknowledgement. Slowly he lowered himself onto the broken chair and extended his injured leg. Lena knelt beside him, setting her revolver on the floor within reach. The bandage he'd wrapped himself was soaked through with blood and grit. This has to come off. She reached for the knife at her belt. His hand shot out, closing around her wrist with startling strength. What are you doing? Cutting the bandage, she said evenly. Though her pulse thundered, his grip was warm and calloused, a warrior's hand. Unless you'd rather I tear it off. After a moment, he released her. My mistake. Lena worked in silence, carefully slicing through the stiffened cloth. Beneath it, the wound was raw and inflamed, but not as bad as she'd feared. The bullet had passed clean through the muscle of his thigh, missing bone and major vessels. Even so, infection was a constant threat in the desert. This is going to hurt, she warned, uncorking the whiskey. Kiro nodded once, his face unreadable. Not a single muscle twitched as she poured the liquor over the wound, though she knew the pain must have been brutal. His only reaction was a slight tightening around his eyes and a controlled breath through his nose. As she cleaned and rewrapped the injury, Lena became uncomfortably aware of him. The solid strength beneath her hands, the smell of smoked sage and something unmistakably male, the measured rhythm of his breathing. Where did you learn English? She asked, needing to break the tension. At the mission school, he replied. His voice stayed flat, but she sensed the weight beneath it. When I was a boy, before you went back to your people, yes, Most children taken to the missions were never meant to return. They were taught to forget who they were. A faint smile touched his mouth. I escaped, he said, after 3 years of being told my language was sinful and my gods were lies. Lena finished tying off the clean bandage, securing it firmly. There, keep it clean, keep it dry. She stood brushing dust from her skirt. How did you get hurt? His expression closed. Army patrol. They've been hunting you since the Rowden massacre. The massacre you say you didn't commit. I don't say it, he replied. I know it. He met her gaze, and the intensity there stole her breath. I've killed men, Lena Ward. I won't deny that. But I've never raised my hand against women or children. Then why does every lawman say otherwise? She leaned against the table, arms folded. Because someone has to wear the blame. Bitterness edged his voice. And it's easier to hunt one Apache than to admit men in blue coats slaughtered a family and pinned it on us. The accusation hung heavy between them. That's a serious charge, Lena said carefully. Against U.S. soldiers. Is it so hard to believe? He gestured to his leg. That bullet came from men who fired without warning, without questions. They would have put another through my skull if I hadn't escaped. Lena wanted to argue to defend the institutions she'd been raised to trust. But 22 years had taught her that uniforms didn't guarantee honor, and a badge, even her father's, didn't always mean justice. My father believes you're guilty, she said quietly. Your father sees only what he expects to see. Kiro's voice held no scorn, just a quiet sadness that came from knowing too much. Same as most men. And what do you see when you look at me? The question slipped out of Lena's mouth before she had time to catch it. He studied her in silence, his eyes dark and unreadable. I see a woman pulled between two worlds, between what she was raised to believe and what her heart is trying to tell her. His words struck deeper than she cared to admit. Her chest tightened. You don't know me. Maybe not. That faint ghost of a smile touched his lips again. But you're here. And that simple truth hit harder than any accusation. Why was she here? Why had she returned? What had drawn her back to a man the world called an outlaw? She busied herself gathering the soiled bandages, turning away from the weight of his gaze. I should head back. Told my father I was visiting Della Quinn for more headache remedy. If I'm gone too long, he'll start asking questions. Will you come again? He said it casually, but Lena could hear the tension behind the words. She hesitated. The logical answer was no. She'd done her part, bandaged his wounds, done her Christian duty. But even as the thought crossed her mind, she knew it was a lie. There was something in Kiro that pulled at her, something she couldn't explain and didn't want to fight. Yes, she said at last. In 2 days. Any sooner and folks will notice. Kiro simply nodded as though he'd expected no less. As she gathered her things, he reached under his shirt and pulled out the silver medallion she'd glimpsed before. In the dim light, she could see the image now, a mountain lion carved deep into the metal. If I'm gone when you return, he said, holding it out. Take this. To remember. Lena stared at it, hesitating. That's the thing they say marks you as the one who led the Rowden raid. If they find me without it, they'll say I ditched it to stay hidden. His hand stayed outstretched. It belonged to my father. It's all I have left of him. She understood the weight of that offering. This wasn't just a trinket, this was identity, legacy. Slowly she reached out and took the medallion. Her fingers brushed his warmth from his skin, heavy in her palm. I'll keep it safe, she said softly, slipping it into her pocket. But I expect to give it back myself. When Lena mounted Sundrop and turned toward town, she could feel Kiro's eyes on her back, a strange mix of heat and weight that stayed long after she was out of sight. The medallion pressed against her leg, solid and warm, a quiet reminder of the secret she now carried, one that could undo them both. 5 visits turned into 10. 10 became 20. Each time she told herself it would be the last. that once Kiro was fully healed, she'd end it. But as summer burned into the first cooler days of fall, she kept finding reasons to return. His wound had healed the angry gash, now a silver scar across his thigh. He no longer needed the crutch. His movements were smooth, controlled. She imagined they'd always been that way before he was wounded. She told herself she was checking in out of duty, but even she couldn't keep lying to herself. The truth was simpler and far more dangerous. She wanted to be there. This morning she arrived at the line shack to find him waiting outside, seated on a sun-warmed boulder. His face tilted toward the sky. He'd built a lean-to along the side of the shack and slept under the stars on warm nights. Sometimes he told her stories about those stars, how the Milky Way was the path spirits walked to the next world, how the morning star led warriors home. He stood when she dismounted, and Lena noticed his hair had been freshly braided, a single hawk feather tied near the end. The sight made her suddenly self-conscious. She'd chosen a blue dress instead of her usual trail clothes. Her hair was pinned with more care than usual. "You're early today," he said. His accent slipped around the words like a creak around stone, soft but steady. "Father rode out to Santa Fe with 2 deputies. He won't be back until tomorrow." She pulled a wrapped bundle from her saddlebag. "I brought cornbread, still warm." She reached into a second pouch. "And this." She handed him a small leather-bound book. A flicker of curiosity lit his face. Over the weeks they'd created a kind of rhythm. Lena brought books, mostly poetry or short tales, and read aloud while Kiro listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just sitting in silence with her voice in the air. "Wordsworth today?" he asked, recognizing the spine. Lena smiled. "You remembered. I thought we could read by the creek," she added. "It's cooler there." The small stream ran just a quarter-mile from the shack. Cottonwoods lined the banks, offering rare shade from the desert sun. They'd gone there before. It had become their unspoken middle ground, neither town nor tribe, just a quiet stretch of earth where the world felt a little less divided. Without another word, they began walking, Lena leading Sundrop by the reins, Kiro matching her stride in silence. Sundrop had grown used to Kiro's presence, no longer flinching when he drew near. Like Lena, the mare had come to trust what she'd once been taught to fear. At the creek, beneath the broad shadow of the cottonwood tree, Lena spread a worn blanket across the grass. Something about the act, a simple domestic gesture, struck her deep. How natural it had become to share this quiet space with him. How familiar. "Tell me what's happening in town," Kiro said as they settled on the blanket. It was part of their ritual. Lena would offer up tidbits from Cimarron, mostly harmless talk, carefully avoiding anything that might point back to the hunt for him. She knew. Part of him asked to gauge danger, but there was real interest in his questions too, a desire to understand her world. "Clara Lynn's engaged to Owen," she reported. "Folks are in a twist 'cause she's only 16. But Martha Lynn says better a rich husband now than a spinster later." "And what does the girl say?" he asked. Lena smiled. That was just like him. While others in town debated dowries and status, Kiro always focused on the ones who had no say. "She seems content enough, but I can't imagine being married so young." Lena plucked a blade of grass and twisted it between her fingers. "My father expects I'll marry Asher Pike once he finishes law school in Boston next spring." She hadn't planned on sharing that. She barely acknowledged it herself. But in Kiro's presence, things spilled out with surprising ease. His face stayed composed, but she noticed a subtle tension in his shoulders. "Is that what you want?" he asked quietly. "It's expected." Lena murmured, eyes fixed on the grass in her hand. "Asher's respectable, educated. My father says he'll be a judge someday, but that wasn't the question," Kiro said gently. "I asked what you want." The steady way he looked at her made her meet his gaze reluctantly. He had a way of seeing past her walls, past all the things she pretended not to feel. "No," she admitted. "It's not what I want. Asher's decent, I guess. But he talks at me, never with me. He's got my life mapped out like a railroad line, never once asked what stop I'd like to get off at. Kiro's voice dropped. And what do you want, Lena Ward? The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Her heart beat faster. What did she want? A year ago, the answer might have been easy. Marriage, children, a safe home. The life she was raised for. But now I want to make my own choices, she said at last. I want to see what's out there, past the fences others built for me. I want you. Her heart whispered, but the words stayed locked in her chest. Still the truth pressed in hard. Somewhere along the way in their conversations and the silences between them, she had fallen for him. And it terrified her. She was the daughter of Marshal Ward, and he was the Apache her father had vowed to bring down. Kiro must have read something in her eyes because slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hand. His skin was rough, sun-worn, but warm. The gesture, so simple, felt profound. In my language, he said quietly, there's a word, Salgai. He looked to the creek. It means where water runs through white rock. But it also means where two streams meet and become one river. Where what was divided becomes whole. Lena looked at their hands, his copper skin against her own sun-browned fingers. Can that happen between people like us? She asked, barely above a whisper. I don't know. Kiro answered honestly. But I've never met anyone like you. Someone who sees not just with her eyes, but with her heart. The tenderness in his voice undid her. Without thinking, without second-guessing, Lena leaned in and kissed him. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. She panicked. Had she read him wrong? Then his hand came to her cheek and he kissed her back, gently, reverently. The kind of kiss that burned low and slow. It made her want to cry for reasons she couldn't explain. It wasn't like the awkward pecks Asher had stolen under church eaves. Those had left her cold, distant. This felt like sunrise, like finding a home she never knew she'd been searching for. When they finally broke apart, Lena kept her eyes closed, afraid of what might be in his face. Afraid of how deeply she'd just jumped into something she couldn't undo. Lena, he said her name, soft as breath, heavy as a vow. She opened her eyes. There was wonder in his look, and beneath it a cautious joy that mirrored her own storm of feelings. I shouldn't have done that, she whispered, even though she didn't regret it for a second. Maybe not, he said. But I'm glad you did. A sharp crack split the stillness, something breaking in the brush nearby. They jumped apart. Sundrop let out a nervous whinny, tugging at her tether. Lena's hand flew to the grip of her revolver just as Kiro rose in one smooth motion, putting himself between her and the noise. For a beat, they both stood frozen. Then a jackrabbit burst from the underbrush, startled and blinking, before bolting into the scrub. The moment shattered, but the truth of what had just passed between them hung thick in the air. Lena let out a shaky breath, but the moment between them had shattered like glass. Reality came crashing down, danger, risk, the impossible weight of what had just passed between them. I should go, she murmured, rising and brushing the dust from her skirt, hands trembling with the effort to steady herself. Kiro gave a quiet nod, though sorrow tugged at the edge of his expression. It's not safe for you to be seen with me. If your father found out. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Marshal Ward was a man of hard rules and iron lines. In his world, there were no blurred edges, just black and white, law and outlaw. Lena gathered the book and blanket, her movements sharp and unsettled. Fear tangled with the warmth Kiro's kiss had left behind. What had she done? What reckless fantasy had she allowed herself to believe? As if reading her thoughts, Kiro gently caught her wrist. Lena, don't punish yourself. What's between us? He paused, searching for words. It's like water cutting through stone. We didn't ask for it. It just is. Even through her confusion, his words sank deep. That was what drew her to him, his way of seeing the world, of finding meaning in things her own people overlooked or ignored. "I don't regret it," she whispered. "But I'm scared, Kiro. Not just for me, for you." He nodded, understanding all the words she couldn't speak. If they were caught, if anyone found out, it wouldn't be Lena who paid the higher price. A white woman, seen with a fugitive Apache, would ignite fury. Swift, brutal fury. "I've stayed too long already," he admitted. "The closer I remain to Cimarron, the greater the risk." A chill gripped her heart. "You're leaving soon. I have to." "Others from my band escaped the reservation. They're heading south toward Mexico. I promised I'd join them once I could travel." The idea of him gone, of never seeing him again, hit her like a punch to the chest. But she knew. He was right. Every day he stayed, the noose tightened. Her father hadn't stopped hunting him, only slowed, waiting for a fresh lead. When she asked a single word, carrying all the weight of what she couldn't say. After the next full moon, he replied, "The dark nights will help. I'll move without being seen. 3 days. 3 days." That's all she had left. Without thinking, Lena reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver medallion he'd given her weeks ago. She had carried it every day since a secret pressed close to her heart. "You should take this back," she said, "for the journey." But Kiro closed her fingers around it, gently folding her hands shut. "Keep it," he said softly. "Let it be a part of me that stays with you." He met her gaze, and his voice was steady and firm. "I will come back for it." "Kiro, I will return," he said again. The promise in his words burned with quiet intensity. "This isn't goodbye, Lena Ward. It's just a pause in our story." She wanted so badly to believe him. But as she climbed onto a sundrop and turned toward town, the weight of the medallion in her pocket felt like an anchor pulling against her ribs. She had always imagined heartbreak would be loud tears, screams, a storm of grief. Instead, it was this, a dull, aching hollow inside her chest. She could smile. She could move. But it never reached her eyes. Something inside her was withering. 2 days passed since her last visit to the shack. Tomorrow Kiro would vanish into the hills, and she would be left with memories and a silver promise she dared not show anyone. Lena had vowed to see him once more. Just one last meeting, one final goodbye. She'd rehearsed it in her head all night, what to say, how to stay strong. But as the sun rose behind the eastern peaks, painting the sky in pale gold, she moved through the house on muscle memory, her heart far from home. Her father had returned from Santa Fe late the night before, bringing with him the kind of news that sent ripples through the household. "We got him," Grant Ward had declared, slamming his palm against the dinner table with grim satisfaction. "That Apache devil who led the Rowden raid. Army patrol spotted him near the old Wilson place. We ride out at noon." The words turned Lena's blood to ice. Only years of practiced composure kept her face neutral. "Are they sure it's him?" she managed, keeping her tone even, despite the panic rising like wildfire. Her father nodded. "Tall fella, silver medallion. Matches the description to a T." He leaned back, voice thick with confidence. "Been hiding there for weeks, seems like. Slippery as a wet trout. Patrol lost him in the rocks, but he ain't gone far. Not with the hole they put in his leg." Lena had excused herself, citing fatigue. But behind the closed door of her room, she collapsed into panic. How had Kiro been seen? Had she led someone there? Had she been followed? The idea that she might have doomed him without knowing was unbearable. Now, as the house came to life around her, Lena forced herself to breathe, to think. At noon, her father and his men would ride. And if she didn't act, Kiro wouldn't live to see the next moon. She had to reach Kiro before noon, warn him to leave at once, not wait for nightfall. The silver medallion pressed warm against her skin, hanging from a leather cord beneath the high collar of her blouse. A constant reminder of what stood to be lost. And what she was already risking. Lena. Her father's voice came from the kitchen doorway. She was kneading dough for the morning bread, hands moving out of habit more than thought. Marshal Grant Ward filled the frame, broad shoulders, solid build, a face carved by years under the New Mexico sun. The silver at his temples had spread lately, but his blue eyes, so much like her own, were sharp and alert. Authority clung to him as naturally as dust to boots. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Lena replied, forcing a smile. "Thought I'd get a start on the baking." He studied her with the same measured gaze that had broken more than one suspect in his office. "You feeling all right?" "You've been quiet since I got back." "Just tired," she lied smoothly. "Headache coming on. I thought I might ride out to Della Quinn's later for some willow bark tea." The excuse had worked before. It would work again. Della's place lay in the same direction as the line shack, perfect cover. Grant grunted, accepting it. "Don't wander too far, not with that Apache still loose." "I'll be careful," she said, the words catching in her throat. Each lie cut deeper than the last, not just a betrayal of her father, but of the girl she'd once been, the obedient daughter who never questioned. Grant poured himself coffee. "We'll have that murderer by sundown. Then folks can sleep easier." Lena pressed the dough harder than necessary. "What if—" she hesitated. "What if he isn't what everyone thinks? What if he didn't lead the Rowden massacre?" Her father's cup stopped halfway to his lips. "What kind of talk is that? I just mean, we never proved he led it. What if someone else?" Grant set the cup down with deliberate care. "I've worn this badge 15 years, Lena. In that time I've learned one thing. Indians, especially Apache, are savages at heart. They understand only force." His voice hardened. 16 people died at the Rowden place. Women, children. I saw them myself. Then with casual cruelty, "Don't you start getting soft over some murdering redskin." The word struck her like a slap. The certainty, the hatred. How had she never truly heard him? "Before I should get the bread in the oven," she said quietly, unable to meet his eyes. Grant watched her a moment longer, then turned away. "I'll be at the office. Be back from Della's by midday. I don't want you out while we're riding." Once he was gone, Lena abandoned the dough without another thought. She changed quickly into her riding clothes, buckled on her revolver, and packed a small sack of provisions. If she moved fast, she could reach the line shack and be back before noon. The morning air was sharp with autumn as she rode out, the season finally pushing back against summer's grip. Lena urged Sundrop harder than usual, urgency driving her on. Red rock and sage blurred past. Juniper stung her nostrils. As the shack came into view, a prickle of unease crept up her spine. The place felt wrong, too alert, too tense. She slowed Sundrop, scanning the land. The shack door stood partly open, rocking slightly in the breeze. Kiro never left it like that. Lena dismounted, revolver in hand. "Kiro," she called softly as she approached. No answer. Heart pounding, she pushed the door wider and stepped inside. At first glance, nothing seemed disturbed. The tin cup still sat on the table. The blanket lay folded on the cot. Then she saw it. A dark stain on the wooden floor near the back room. Blood. Panic clawed up her throat. "Kiro." She called again, louder now. A faint sound came from the storage room. She moved toward it, gun raised, hope and fear colliding in her chest. She found him slumped against the far wall, one hand pressed to his side where fresh blood spread across his shirt. His face was tight with pain, his copper skin gone ashen. "Lena," he whispered, her name barely carried on his breath. "You shouldn't have come," Kiro rasped. "It's not safe." Lena dropped to her knees beside him, in an instant, revolver cast aside as she gently pulled his hand away from the wound. "What happened? Who did this to you?" "Army patrol," he said, through clenched teeth. He winced as she peeled back the shirt, soaked in blood, to reveal a deep gash just below his ribs. "Yesterday sunset. Thought I'd lost them in the rocks." One circled back. The sight of the wound made her stomach twist. This wasn't like a clean bullet pass, it was jagged, brutal. Dangerous. Why didn't you run? Why didn't you go south the moment you could? Couldn't travel. Not like this. He held her gaze, and I gave you my word. I'd see you one more time. That quiet promise, spoken with the same calm dignity he always carried, shattered something inside her. Tears threatened, but Lena forced them back. There was no time for softness now. My father knows you're here, she whispered, tearing fabric from her petticoat to press against the wound. He's close, too close. They're riding out at noon. A flicker of a smile ghosted across Kiro's lips. Then I guess I've run out of time. No, Lena snapped, fierce and trembling. I won't let them take you. Kiro looked at her with quiet sadness. What would you do? Lena Ward draw on your own father to protect an Apache. The question dropped like a hammer. Could she truly stand against everything she'd ever known for him? It won't come to that, she said, jaw set. Because you're not going to be here when they arrive. Neither of us will. His eyes widened. What are you saying? I'm coming with you. The words spilled from her lips, final, unshakable. We head south. To Mexico. To anywhere they won't follow. You can't, he said, shaking his head. Your life, your family. What life? She cut in. A future married to Asher Pike, throwing teas and pretending injustice, isn't choking this place. That girl died the day I found you bleeding in the dust. His voice dropped, full of warning. Your father will never stop. He'll chase us to the ends of the territory. Then we ride farther, Lena said as she finished tying the bandage, her hands steady, even as her heart thundered. Can you stay in the saddle? Kiro took a breath, gauging his limits with the eye of a man who knew pain well. Not long, not fast. We don't need fast yet. Just enough to vanish. Her mind turned like a wheel in a flash flood. There's a line of caves down in Red Rock Canyon, 5 miles south. We can hole up there till dark. Then take the old smuggler's trail across the border. He blinked. You know that trail? My father's been trying to shut it down for years. I've heard enough around the supper table to map it in my sleep. A bitter smile curved her mouth. Funny thing being the quiet daughter, folks forget you're listening. With careful effort, she helped him stand. He leaned hard against her, breath shallow but steady. The wound was bad but not fatal if they moved fast and infection didn't set in. There's a stallion in the gully behind the shack, he said. Apache pony. I've been working him the past few weeks. He'll carry me. Lena nodded. I'll get the supplies. We're gone in 10. As she packed what little they had, Lena felt an eerie calm settle over her. She should have been terrified she was leaving everything behind. Her father, her name, her whole life. But what she felt wasn't fear. It was clarity, as though every step in her life had led her to this decision. The medallion at her chest, warm against her skin, felt less like a keepsake and more like a vow. When she returned, the stallion was waiting, sleek and strong, with a white blaze cutting down its nose. As Kiro reached for the saddle, he caught her hand and held it tight. Are you sure, Lena? He asked, searching her face. Once we ride, there's no turning back. She looked toward the shack, then out past the haze, where Cimarron shimmered in the distance. That town had been her whole world for 22 years. I'm sure, she said, voice steady. My life is with you now, wherever that leads. They rode south through thornbrush and red earth, hugging the shadows of rocks. The sun climbed steadily behind them, but neither looked back. Kiro sat tall despite the wound eyes, sharp scanning every ridge and bend. And Lena rode beside him, not as a fugitive's daughter, not as the sheriff's girl, but as a woman who had finally chosen her own path. Lena led the way through the narrowing stretch of red rock, guiding them toward the cave network she'd spoken of. The sun had climbed high, blazing down without mercy. By the time Grant Ward would be gathering his posse back in Cimarron, they reached the canyon's mouth, where jagged walls of crimson and gold rose like cathedral walls, weathered by time and heat. The caves were carved into the eastern bluff, reachable only by a narrow, winding trail. Hidden. Defensible. "We'll rest here," Lena said, helping Kiro dismount beside a hulking boulder that offered shade. "The horses need water, and we need to get that bleeding under control." A small spring trickled down the canyon wall, pooling briefly before disappearing underground. Lena led Sundrop and the stallion to drink, while Kiro eased down against the stone, his breaths shallow but measured. "How far's the border from here?" he asked as she knelt to check his bandage. 2 days. "If we ride hard," she said. "Longer with your injury." Her stomach turned at the sight of fresh blood seeping through the bandage. "We've got to stop this." Kiro nodded toward a wiry sage plant growing near the water's edge. "Crush the leaves. Make a poultice. It'll help." She worked quickly, following his instructions, crushing the leaves between stones and packing the paste into the wound. As her hands moved, their eyes locked, and in that stolen quiet with danger closing in from all sides, something flared between them again. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," Kiro whispered, lifting a hand to gently touch her cheek. "A woman who looks past the lines drawn in the dust." "You showed me those lines were mine to erase," Lena breathed. "You made me believe I could choose." A sound sharp and distant bounced off the canyon walls. Hoofbeats. Lena froze. They couldn't have followed us so fast. "Not your father," Kiro said, voice low, body already tensing. "That's Army patrol. They must have been watching the shack, waiting for me." Lena reached for her revolver, her mind racing. The caves. Their only chance. High ground, one way in, one way out. But Kiro's condition made the climb treacherous. "We have to move now." She helped him stand. He winced, sweat beading on his brow, but he didn't hesitate. "Can you make it up that trail?" Kiro looked at the climb, jaw tight. "I'll make it." They tied the horses in a shadowed crease in the rocks, praying they'd stay quiet. The climb was brutal, narrow, steep, no room for a slip. Twice Kiro faltered. His breathing labored, but he never gave in. Driven by something deeper than strength, pure survival. They reached the largest cave just as 4 bluecoats rode into view below. The soldiers' dismounted rifles slung low, scanning the earth like wolves on a scent. Their rifles flashed in the sun. "They'll pick up our trail," Kiro murmured. As if summoned, Sundrop let out a faint whinny from her hiding place. One of the soldiers snapped his head up. "There," he shouted. "Check the hollow." Lena's hand gripped her revolver. "If they find us..." Kiro's voice was grave. "I won't be taken alive. And you," his words caught, "they won't spare you, Lena." Not when she'd thrown everything away to ride with him. Not when they found her hiding alongside an Apache fugitive. No badge would save her. No name. There'd be no arrest. No trial. Only blood. The soldiers had found the horses now. One held Sundrop's reins and squinted at the saddle. "This mare's branded," he called out. "She belongs to the sheriff's daughter." "What the hell is it doing out here?" another barked. "Spread out," the leader snapped. "Fan out. The Apache ain't far. Especially with that wound." Lena turned to Kiro, heart pounding. "I'll draw them off. Get them away from here." "You slip out the back, follow the ridge, no." His hand clamped around her wrist firm, despite the pain. "I won't leave you. They won't hurt me," she argued. "I'm Marshal Ward's daughter." You still believe that his dark eyes locked on hers. "After everything you've done, running, hiding, helping me, you think that badge still protects you?" Below, the soldiers were splitting off, 2 of them, starting up the trail. Time was bleeding away. "Then we stand together," Lena said, raising her revolver. But Kiro's hand slid over hers, pressing the barrel down. "There's another way." From inside his shirt, he pulled a small leather pouch. "Signal smoke," he said, voice steady. "My people use this to speak across great distances," Kiro said quietly, holding the small leather pouch. "If my band is anywhere within 20 miles, they'll see the smoke." They'll come. Hope surged in Lena's chest. How fast? Not fast enough to stop these soldiers, he admitted, but maybe fast enough to save us from what comes next. She understood he wasn't thinking about just the patrol. He was thinking about Grant Ward, the man leading a larger hunt with no intention of mercy. If they could slip past the patrol, his kin might still reach them before her father did. Lena gave a single nod. Do it. While Kiro prepared the signal, a resin and herb blend meant to burn with a smoke pale as moonlight, Lena took position at the cave's edge, revolver steady in her grip. Below, 4 soldiers were halfway up the trail, rifles drawn, boots crunching on the narrow rock. When I light it, Kiro warned, the smoke will rise high. It'll bring them straight to us. How long do we let it burn? 3 minutes. No more. Lena drew a breath through her teeth. Then we hold this place for 3 minutes. He met her eyes not with fear, but fire. We will. With a practiced flick of his hand, Kiro struck flint to resin. The mixture caught instantly, sending up a thick curl of blue-white smoke that climbed from the cave mouth like a spirit rising to the sky. Shouts rang out below. There, the caves barked a soldier. It's him, the Apache. Another yelled already, leveling his rifle. The first shot cracked the stone above Lena's head. Chips flew. She ducked just in time as another shot ricocheted off the rock face behind her. They've got cover! Someone shouted. Harrison, circle north. We'll pin him down. Lena risked a glance. The smoke rose like a beacon, cutting the sky in two. 1 minute gone. 2 to go. They're flanking us, she said, eyes scanning the ridge. Kiro nodded grimly. We hold here, he said again, no matter what. Another volley tore into the cave's edge. Lena fired back, not to kill, just to keep them from pushing forward. She had 5 rounds. Each one had to count. Movement drew her eye. Harrison creeping along a narrow ledge that wrapped toward the right flank. Lena lined up her shot and fired. The bullet slammed into the stone near his boots. He scrambled, pressing himself against the cliff wall. Good. Keep him scared. 2 minutes, Kiro murmured. Below, the rest of the patrol had taken cover, settling in. They had numbers and time, and they believed those would be enough. What they didn't know was Kiro and Lena only needed 1 more minute, 1 more breath of sky for the signal to reach the desert beyond. Harrison moved again, slower now, more cautious. Lena squeezed off another round. He retreated, cursing. 3 left, she muttered. Kiro stood tall beside her, despite the blood blooming across his side. His jaw was clenched, his breathing shallow, but his eyes stayed locked on the thinning smoke. Another shot struck the rock near the entrance. This time a shard sliced across Lena's cheek. Warm blood trickled, but she didn't flinch. Her focus tunneled in on the smoke's last tendrils. Now, Kiro said. It's done. Lena gave a tight nod. Then we move. On the far side of the cave system, a natural chimney rose to the canyon rim, tight, winding, but navigable. If they could reach it without being spotted, they could vanish into the labyrinth of arroyos beyond. We need to a rifle cracked from above, but not aimed at the cave. The shot exploded into the sand near the soldiers. They scrambled, yelling, "What the hell? Where did that come from?" More shots rang out, sharp and steady, coming from the canyon rim. Lena rushed to the edge and peered out. Riders. At least a dozen figures moved along the cliffs, weapons-drawn horses shifting beneath them. Kiro's people. They had seen the smoke, and they had come faster than either of them dared hope. "Come on," Kiro said, urgency returning to his voice. "We move while they've got 'em pinned down." They slipped deeper into the cave. Kiro led, limping but steady, guiding her through the dark as if he'd memorized every shadow. Lena followed close, revolver in hand, heart racing. The chimney was narrow, carved by time and widened by use, an escape path once used by generations of Apache. Climbing it was agony. Kiro's wound tore wide open. Blood slicked the stone beneath his hands. Still he climbed. Lena fought through her own burning limbs, pushing upward, refusing to let fear drag her down. The only thing that mattered was the light above the circle of sky that promised escape. Finally, hands reached down from above and pulled them free. Strong, steady hands pulled them up to safety. Lena found herself surrounded by Apache warriors, silent, sharp-eyed men who took in her presence with guarded expressions. They didn't raise weapons, but they didn't lower their guard either. She was a stranger in their world, a white woman standing beside one of their own. One man stepped forward, older than the rest. His black hair was streaked with gray, braided tight down his back. Lines of age and authority were carved deep into his face like weathered rock. He spoke quickly to Kiro in their native tongue, gesturing down toward the canyon where the sound of gunfire had faded into stillness. Kiro replied, his voice weak but steady. Then switching to English, he said, "Lena, this is Ravenor, my mother's brother." Ravenor's eyes narrowed on her. "The soldiers have pulled back, but they'll return, and they'll bring more." The old man turned his gaze on Lena. Cold, searching. "Sheriff's daughter," he said in thickly accented English. "Why you help my sister's son?" Before she could answer, Kiro staggered his legs, buckling. Two warriors stepped forward to catch him before he fell. "He's losing too much blood," Lena said quickly. "We need to stop it." Ravenor gave a single nod. "We go. Now." He barked orders. In moments, the Apache men moved with swift efficiency. One lifted Kiro onto a pony. Another brought a spare horse to Lena. She swung into the saddle, gripping the reins tight as she looked back one last time. Down there, beneath the burning sun and red stone, was everything she'd once known. Cimarron, her father, her old life. By now, Grant Ward would have discovered she was gone. He'd be organizing a search, convinced she'd been taken. He'd never believe she chose to leave. In his eyes, she was lost. A daughter who'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Ravenor rode up beside her, his pony stamping the dust. "We ride south," he said. "Cross before night. No stopping." Lena nodded. "I understand." His eyes narrowed again. "Why white woman leave everything?" "Ride with enemy of her people." She reached into her shirt and pulled the silver medallion from her neck. "Let it catch the sun." Ravenor's face changed. Recognition flickered across it like a wind on a fire. "Because love doesn't ask about blood or borders," Lena said quietly. "And because I stopped looking with my eyes and started seeing with my heart. That was enough." He gave a sharp nod and turned his pony, leading the group down the southern trail. Lena nudged her horse closer to Kiro's. He rode slumped but awake. She reached for his arm, steadying him. "Stay with me," she whispered fiercely. "We've come too far to lose each other now." Kiro turned, his hand closing over hers. Their fingers locked. Always, he murmured, his gaze locking onto hers. That look, that fire in his eyes, it was the same one that had pierced her soul back in the canyon the day they first met. "Our rivers have joined now, Lena. Where you go, I go." As they rode south toward the uncertain safety of the border, toward a life unpromised but freely chosen, Lena felt something falling away behind her. The fear, the expectations, the chains. There'd be hardship ahead, danger no doubt, but also freedom and love. The sun blazed above, casting long shadows behind them as they disappeared into the wilderness. Two silhouettes riding side by side, once separate, now one, like twin streams joined into a single unstoppable river. Thank you for staying with us through the very end of this frontier love story. If Lena and Kiro's journey moved something in your heart, we kindly invite you. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of love, courage, and redemption. Like, if you believe love can break any barrier. Comment to share your thoughts. We read. Everyone, share this with someone who believes in impossible love. And stick around. At the end of this video, we'll recommend another story from our collection. Click it. You just might lose your breath all over again. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deepfake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and a respect for original creative work.